This took place in 2020. It was in a little riverside college town in the Midwest. It was 5 of us girls who were just moving into a new college-style house. Some of us had already graduated from school, so we were going to just all be there for an extra year, whether that be working or just finishing up school. One of the girls of the house that we were moving into had already lived there for a few years, and we were all friends with her. 4 of us moving into the house were brand new. We moved in, though, mid-May of 2020. Unfortunately, we had left by the beginning of August of 2020, so it was short-lived. Just to understand the story, I will have to lay out what the house looked like. It's very important to know what levels, what rooms, everything makes the story easier to follow. It was a 2-story house. When you walk into the front door, though, it was a stairwell that separated the levels. So if you went down the hallway, straight through the stairwell, it was a little hallway that led to the basement. The basement was just storage, nothing really that important. When you walk into the stairwell directly off to the right, there's another door that leads to the main level. And then obviously when you walk in, there's a stairwell as well that goes up to the upper level that also has a door that leads into that top. On the main level, there are 2 bedrooms with its own bathroom and its own kitchen, and that's also where the main living space is with the living room that we all share. Upstairs, there is also 3 bedrooms, and it does also have its own bathroom and its own kitchen. How it was all split off is also very important, of who was in what room. I had leased one of the rooms on the main level of the 2, and then there was the other girl who had lived there full time, lived in the other room. Over the summer, I had another job back in my hometown, so I was going to be traveling back and forth. So I actually sublet out my room downstairs to someone that I knew for that summer, just so it was paid for, and then I would just come back every once in a while to visit. Upstairs, there were the 3 bedrooms. 2 of them, again, were going to be there full time, and the 3rd roommate was not going to be there all summer long. So it worked out that when I would come to visit, I would just stay in her room, so I had a place to sleep, stay, put my things while I would be visiting. In the beginning, mid-May, when we had moved in, everything was really fun. It was the beginning of 2020, obviously, so COVID was hitting. We didn't have a lot of options of things to do, so we spent a lot of time together. We watched movies and played games. One of the girls had access to the rooftop from their room, so we would sit out there and listen to music. It started off really well those first few weeks. The subleaser had moved into my room at the end of May, so I had gone home to start my job. A few weeks later, though, I had come back to visit and was staying in the room upstairs. The girls had mentioned some weird things happening. Nothing had really been off. No weird occurrences had happened with the tenants that lived there before, and we all knew them, so this was very strange that these things were happening. It started very small. That night, all of their doors were closed. So the 2 girls that were living there, as well as the empty room, all of the doors were closed at night when they would sleep. The girls stated that when they were sleeping, either trying to fall asleep or they'd wake up in the middle of the night from it, they would hear humming coming from the hallways. They didn't specifically say if it sounded like a specific song, random little humming noises that would be coming from the hallway and then just go away and randomly reappear. The door to the empty room they did also keep closed. When they would wake up, the door would always be open. The weird thing about this, though, was that door was particularly hard to open and close, so it wasn't wind or something we could rationalize off what would open that besides someone actually physically opening it themselves. Something that we still don't understand to this day is that is the only room in the house that has a padlock on it. We don't know why it was there. We don't know who had put that on there. And eventually we did start using it when the door wouldn't stop opening and eventually closing in the middle of the night. At that point, things were still fairly new. We were rationalizing off those little occurrences that were happening, but it just felt heavy upstairs. Whenever I'd walk around, I would creep around the corner first or walk really slow, like I felt like I had to establish and see everything in the space before I would feel comfortable walking into it. I just was so curious. I felt like something was seriously watching me all the time. No matter what room I was in, bathroom, kitchen, it was bad. One of my first real experiences was while I was taking a shower. A lot of these events happened so fast, and it's really hard to always remember the order of operations, but this definitely happened towards the beginning. When I was in the shower, again, it was the same feeling of being watched. I kept looking outside the curtains, and I know sometimes you do that when you're alone and you're kind of a little paranoid, but I seriously was looking out, very frequently looking behind me. I felt a little tickle on my neck, but I was again trying to rationalize that, saying, I'm in the shower, the water's running on me, I'm washing my hair, but I tried to enter that shower as soon as possible. Once I got out, I did bring up to the two girls that lived upstairs when they got home that I took a shower and it felt weird. You know, I felt like something tickled me, but I think I'm just overreacting. They looked at me and they said, oh, we don't shower alone. If someone's taking a shower in there, they leave the door open or someone's sitting on the toilet next to them, because when they're in the shower and they're alone or no one's near them, their hair will move, like someone's picking up their hair, picking at it, or rubbing their back. The shower, and this also happens to the sink, will just turn really hot, scalding hot all of a sudden, and you'll have to kind of jump out of the water. They just will not be alone in that room. Their reactions when I had told them about the shower and when they were explaining to me, you know, how they don't shower without someone with them, it seemed more matter of fact, like it was happening so often that they were like, duh, why would you shower alone? I was freaked out, and they were freaked out by all of the occurrences, but that was just something that had happened so often. I think they were just unfortunately used to it at that point. We were having a lot of fun together, so we kind of put up with it for a while, and they just brushed that off until it started to get worse. This only happened upstairs. So the girls downstairs really didn't experience anything. I'm not quite sure if they believed the girls upstairs, but I did. I experienced it myself. With all of these things occurring at night, with the humming, the door opening, we started sleeping with our lights on. We tried to rationalize that maybe if we left the lights on, it wouldn't do those things. We'd trick it to think we were awake. One of my roommates in particular, Megan, had the typical college lights, the sticky lights that are around your ceiling, and you have a remote that turns them on and off, and they can change color. The lights would turn off. So you would try to keep the lights on to sleep, but they would just randomly turn off. She kind of tried to experiment with it, and move the remote that she had under her or sleep with it under the bed. For some reason, if something's touching it, it can't. So she had done this, and the next morning she woke up and the lights were turned off, and she had looked, and the plug from the wall had actually been ripped out. Something had physically taken the plug out of the wall because it wasn't able to access the remote that she had to turn the lights off. That also happened in the room I was staying in. It was controlled by a remote, and it even was happening when we were moving in. We just thought, oh, these lights are broken. Why do they keep turning off? But we still don't really understand, I guess, after all of this, but we think it might be related to what was happening in Megan's room, but we're not quite sure. At this point, we don't know what's going on. We have an inkling that it's maybe something messing with us, but we don't really know. We haven't seen anything. It's all been things that we've been trying to rationalize, maybe bad plumbing, maybe bad electrical, maybe the house is moving so the door is opening. But then it started to become more frightening and obvious. My one roommate, Sarah, was targeted by these scary things a little bit more than others. One of them was she was up in her room doing homework, watching TV, and she had randomly heard blood-curdling scream coming from downstairs. Just horrible screaming, thought someone was injured. So she ran out of her room, ran down the stairwell, burst into the living room, and then went and checked on the roommates to see what was going on. And both the subleaser as well as the other roommate that lived downstairs were both just chilling in their room, watching Netflix, not doing anything, no noises, nothing. So that happened multiple times. You would be upstairs and just hear noises downstairs and nothing would be there at all. We all had very vivid dreams as well. I was staying in the room that had the padlock on it. It was really hot, so I had a fan on. I had my laptop up, playing some kind of show on Netflix. I was trying to fall asleep and I did turn the lights off. My leg was sticking out from under the covers and it felt like something was kind of tickling my leg. But again, I tried to rationalize maybe it was the wind of the fan with maybe some leg hairs. I don't know. I tried, and then all of a sudden it kind of became like a scratch. So I immediately sat up, and I didn't even think to turn on a flashlight or turn on the room lights. I took a picture with the flash. I was going to send it to my friend, who was actually leasing that room, and I was going to send her that picture, and I looked at it, and there was a kind of red scratch mark and a bruise and kind of a little hole in my leg in that part. I don't remember there being a bruise there before. I don't remember there being a red mark. It looked like there might have been a scab on my leg that was kind of ripped off. It had scared me enough that I turned the lights on and was trying to sleep with the lights on again. Somehow that night I did fall asleep. My first dream was me having a lake day with my family. We were all swimming in the lake. Some of us were outside on the dock, but most of us were swimming. All of a sudden, the lake had turned black. Everyone's eyes had turned black, and they just all had a blank stare and were going underwater. The family members, including me, who did not do that, they were trying to swim underneath their feet and pull them under and drown them. And I remember in my dream taking a t-shirt and trying to cover my feet so like I wouldn't get pulled down. Then all of a sudden it snapped and I was in a field. It was a big open green, rolling hills field, and I was standing there with a goat that was on its hind legs. Somewhere in this, the goat had assaulted me. I then woke up because I had wet the bed. I have never wet the bed before in my life. Adult life, middle school, childhood. I even called my dad to ask. I said, is this a habit that maybe I'm reverting back to? And he's like, no, you never did through my college years. Never. Obviously, I was mortified. This wasn't my bed, so I got up immediately. I took all of the sheets down to the washing machine. I threw them in, and I called my friend just wanting to be transparent and let her know and apologize. And she said, wait, back up. She said, what was in your dream? And I had mentioned the dream, and she said, Bryn, do you not realize that the goat is an animal representative of the devil? And I processed that, and I said, yeah, you're correct saying that. So from that night on, I never slept in that room again. I moved all of my things downstairs, and I slept in the living room. Even in the living room, though, even though there was no really occurrences downstairs, the dogs that were my roommates would still bark at dark corners randomly. They would bark at the door that led to the stairwell. They would just bark at it incessantly at random. Although those things would happen again, I didn't know if that was just dogs being dogs, but I felt a lot safer downstairs. But yeah, after that, nope. Never slept in that room ever again, and I don't think anyone else has. None of our roommates have. At some point during all of this, I was at my hometown, and Megan, my roommate, had told her mom, and her mom was concerned enough that she called a medium to try to come in to see if she could help. When we were telling the medium about what was happening, she said that it sounded like there might be two things there. She said she would be willing to help, and she did say, I want to do a drive-by the night before just to get a feel for the house before I actually come in. She did a drive-by, and by the morning, she had blocked all three of their phone numbers and never got back to us. So at that point, we were kind of just on our own. We also did a lot of research on the house and couldn't find any dirt on the house. We couldn't find anything about any kind of weird events, any crimes. The house was right next to a Lutheran church, so we have no idea if that had anything to do with it. The house was also under construction on the external parts of it. They were doing new windows and new walls, so we were just trying to grasp at any maybe reason why these things would have happened to us and no one else. Unfortunately, things did not get any better. They actually got more physical again. I had mentioned that I had a bruise on my leg. Sarah had bruises all over her body. I even mentioned when I woke up the next morning, look at what's on my leg, and she said, oh, I have those all over me. So she had bruises all over her body, all up her legs, her arms. One weekend she had left to go camping, and all of the bruises had gone away. When she came back, within a few days, they were all back. They just felt something touching them when they would be sleeping, so both of them really didn't get a lot of sleep, so both of them were kind of just mentally not there for a few months. Sarah also had an encounter where she was in her room, and she was working on homework, and she had all of her things kind of spread out on the floor. She was just working head down, legs crossed, leaning over, and she had a mirror, a glass mirror, so not one of the kind of plastic cheap ones you can put over your door. She had a glass mirror that was leaning up against the wall. She had looked up at one point, she saw something moving, and the mirror was actually tipping over onto her, and she was able to catch it. If she didn't look and see it and catch it, it probably would have smashed over her head. The most concerning part of that, besides her potentially getting injured, was this mirror was leaning against the wall. If it were to fall, it should have slid. The bottom of it should have come out from under it and should have slid and fell flat. But it tipped up and over, and she had to catch it to stop it. Megan, at night, had a few encounters as well of being touched, just like Sarah had. This first night, it was the most vivid for her. She was laying in bed, obviously had the lights on, and she could see handprints crawling into her bed on her sheets. Once they got close enough, she could feel the pressure of the blankets getting tighter around her and on her. That happened more than one occasion. Soon it started actually showing itself, but we still don't know this thing really was. Megan one night was asleep. She had woken up because she heard something in the corner of her room. She sat up and looked, and there was a little boy standing in the corner of her room just looking at her. She described him maybe as like 6 years old, didn't really get enough of a look to get an outfit or anything, but definitely saw a little boy standing in the corner of her room. She looked away and it wasn't there. The door at the top of the stairwell, it started moving in the middle of the night and opening and closing and knocking. Someone would be knocking at it. So they would start locking it when they would be home or when they would be sleeping, and you'd have to use the key to get into the upstairs. Even when they locked it, the knocking still continued, but they started hearing like someone trying to get in with a key. And one time they actually came home, and Sarah had seen some kind of little boy moving around the key that had been in the door. And then it had gone away. So they had seen this apparition of a little boy multiple times, but again, the medium had said that it seemed like there might be multiple things, and these things were scaring us. It was like meaning to make us feel uncomfortable, so we don't particularly believe that it might have just been this little boy trying to mess with us. All of our dreams and just the horrible feelings we had, it felt like something might be acting as a little boy, or there might be multiple things that were there. We still to this day don't really understand why all of this happened. We didn't really talk about it for a long time. I was honestly hesitant to come on and share it because the people that lived in there before us never had anything. But ultimately, it became so overwhelming and serious and just ultimately scary. They weren't sleeping. We weren't sleeping. I wasn't able to be in the house anymore. We all left the house by the beginning of August. We were getting subleasers. And we all had different places to live. We're still not sure if maybe it followed one of us into the house. We're not sure if anything continued after that. We felt kind of bad about it, but it doesn't sound like anything happened to the new subleasers, but we did not disclose anything to the new subleasers. It didn't seem like it was targeting the people before, and we were so desperate to get out. I think they were a little suspicious as to why we were leaving so fast. I mean, I would be, but we were all able to get subleasers really quick, and we were able to move out, luckily, really quick. I don't think it's followed any of us afterwards. I think we've all been able to just move on. But we couldn't put up with what was going on. We were too scared and we did have to leave.